Here we go. The beginning of session 2 of our Cosmic Conference. Hi, everybody. My name is Marilyn. I'm the founder and CEO of Cosmic Centaurs, and we're super excited to be on our second panel of the day for the inaugural edition of the Cosmic Conference. Our theme for the conference is all about the future of work, and particularly how remote work is going to impact how we operate and how we collaborate. Today's second panel is one that I'm really excited about because it's talking about the impact of remote work on the top and bottom line of a business, trying to understand how remote work has really impacted our organization's ability to manage their finances. As companies struggle to stay afloat in complex economic circumstances, leaders are seeking new ways to rationalize their costs, but also explore new revenue streams. And remote work seems like a natural solution. But we also know that disengaged employees can have a potential negative offsetting effect on the top line. And we're hoping that this discussion will help us to evaluate the effects of remote work on a company's profitability and how we can create a healthy balance between, cutting down or rationalizing our costs and generating new revenue. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, this video is streaming on multiple platforms, Facebook and LinkedIn. Please feel free to give us a like, to share it with people you know who might be interested in the topic, but also, and more importantly, to write down your questions in our comment section that I will make sure to curate for the Q&A at the end of the session. If you do want to share about the conference, please use the hashtag Cosmic Conference to keep up with the conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or anywhere else that you're sharing. And without further ado, let's get started. I'll be your moderator for the day, and joining me for this LinkedIn Live are amazing panelists who I'm very grateful to have here with us for our second session of the day. I'll introduce them first. So first up, we have Jean-Luc Ferraton. He's been the managing director of Intrum France since March of this year. Definitely a very exciting time to get promoted to run a company, after being the CHRO of the group. Jean-Luc has also served as the head of HR at JTEC, I hope I pronounced that right, which is part of the Toyota Group, and held positions at HR firm, the Adico Group, and Elior. He also has an executive MBA from INSEAD, which is how we know each other and also how we know Mikkel. Mikkel Seidelin is a director at Teekay London. He's been in the shipping industry for almost 17 years, working for Teekay Tankers in commercial roles, spanning from operations, chartering, and pool management in London, Vancouver, Houston, and Singapore, a lot of really exciting places. He's currently leading the Suez Max segment. By the way, I had to Google that, so if you guys don't know what Suez Max, I think it's a very interesting thing to deep dive into for Teekay Tankers, while also heading up Teekay London, that we also met through his executive MBA at INSEAD. And last but not least, we have Rushdi Ali. Rushdi is currently the commercial finance director for GE Power in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. He's been with GE for 13 years in the finance function with varied roles across multiple businesses and geographies. He supports a regional team of about 100 people, looking at things like deal structuring, internal underwritings and negotiations for new power plant bids, to aftermarket services. And in the COVID-19 era, this has meant real-time adjustment of deal strategies on profitability and cash, while continuing to navigate the challenges faced by the end customer and internal supply chain. Enough from me. I want us to hear from our amazing lineup of panelists, and I'm going to start them off with potentially a tough question, but I think an important one to ask. Could you please share with us, what is the impact that the pandemic and remote work in particular has had on both your top and bottom lines? Talk to us about productivity, savings, new revenue streams. How has this pandemic and remote work changed things for you? And maybe we can start with Jean-Luc.
So we have been I've done, as you say, France, the 12th of March, which was exactly the day the country has been under lockdown. And the first impact we had was on the business to business, because of course, a lot of companies didn't invoice that much their clients. And we work on the credit management services. So when it comes to the top line, it has been a decrease of the volume of cases that we have to handle, which has been roughly between 30-40%, depending on the different business lines. But that has also delivered some impact on the bottom line because of the mobilization of the people. We are a service company. It's only about people. And these people has been able to mobilize in order to continue the service to the clients and also to find all the solutions that we might find in order to continue this service. And we have gained a lot on the intangible asset of the company when it comes to the autonomy, when it comes to the trust, and when it comes to the capability to find innovative solutions to continue the service. So on the top line, it has been a decrease of the volumes, meaning a decrease of the capability to invoice. But on the same time, we have saved so much of fixed costs when it comes to tracing, when it comes to phone, when it comes to postage, which was substituted by innovation from the team, that I think we have won a lot in terms of team spirit and in terms of trust. And if I had to summarize the impact that we had after 9 years in Sweden and 3 months in France, it has been a huge transformation of the company in terms of trust and self-discipline. We're in a country where we had a little bit more of hierarchy and a bit more of a strict rule of working, which was completely put upside down with the lockdown and people working from home. So Intrum in France is 650 people, and 610 of them had to move back from the office to home in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's insane. And definitely remote work requires companies to treat their employees like mature adults and really trust them and give them autonomy in what they do. Otherwise, it really doesn't work. You can't oversee people in the same way as you used to. Rushdi, how about in GE Power? How have things changed for you guys?
Yeah, sure. So, just to give you context about GE, we're a conglomerate. There are other divisions such as aviation, which went through a significant amount of churn and pain. Speaking of gas power, it's a critical infrastructure business in particular within GE. Customers, governments are appreciative of what electricity meant through the entire cycle, and it was designated as a critical infrastructure need. On the top line, I think lesser of an impact just because maintenance activities continued, which we planned for. We did see some of the large projects, new power plants getting shifted out in this region, particularly largely because of capex from the price of oil, as governments went through deficits and there were challenges as well. I think by and large, we could hold on to the maintenance channels just because of how we could reconfigure our supply chain, how we deploy people. To give you an example, we would have parts flying in from Europe, service engineers based out of Middle East going out for an outage in Algeria. Very challenging to do in normal times, let alone when there's a COVID lockdown which has been implemented. But we've reconfigured, we looked at our business supply chain all over again, instituted quarantine requirements as these service crews flew in, worked with our customers, and could ensure continuity, which is paramount given the industry, the nature of the industry we are in. On the bottom line, I think, before I go to the bottom line, safety is paramount for our customers, for our employees. So obviously there was a reset in how we're going to do business, how we're going to deploy and service our fleet of gas turbines. So that had a cost implication, obviously. But besides that, rejigging the supply chain, looking at what we would do from areas where the impact of COVID was lesser, naturally meant there was a cost element to it, and also a timely element as well, because we could not focus on the least cost country or the best cost country. It had to be what's the most efficient answer to be able to get that engineer out the door and ensure continuity and reliability for the end customer. So top line, I would say, single digit impact that passes on to the bottom line as well. But we've been creative in looking at new revenue streams, customers who need digital support to be able to remotely operate their power plants. So we've seen that line getting adopted as digital adoption went up significantly. Those have been uptakes in terms of the software space and our ability to support them digitally.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, definitely we've discussed in our first panel around technology how the way that we deliver service to our customers and value to them is also shifting internally for the organizations. Thank you so much for that, Rushdi. Mikkel, how has this materialized for you?
I think if we start with the top line, with our revenue, it's been a real roller coaster. We started off in a very strange environment with the lockdowns. There was no demand for the commodity, for the crude that we're transporting, and at the same time we had a price war going on between Russia and Saudi Arabia and OPEC, and this created this inventory of crude just piling up, and it was stocked on the ships, and the demand for ships went up, and then freight rates went up, and that caused a really intense market for a couple of months, and we, of course, nothing like that is sustainable, nothing like that lasts forever. So now the market has adjusted downwards, and we are facing a quite low market again. So it's been a real roller coaster, but overall net we probably benefited from the lockdowns, from a top line point of view. On the cost side of it, we have obviously saved a fair bit of money from travel costs and entertainment and so on like that. But on the shore side, one of the biggest problems we have had over the last couple of months and still have is and it goes a little bit to what you were saying, Rushdi, as well. We have a lot of seafarers. We have about, in the whole group, 6,000 seafarers on our vessels, and they need to be able to come and go to the ships, and we need to change them out, and as their contract expires, and that's been very difficult. I have to say our customers has been extremely helpful, allowing us to deviate the vessels to get our colleagues off the ships and new colleagues on the ship. But local authorities has been not so helpful on that, and that has been a little bit disappointing. So that's one of the big challenges right now. The seafarers seems to have become a little bit of the forgotten frontline workers, because without them, a lot of the other stuff that we're doing wouldn't be possible. So that's one of our biggest challenges right now, and where our cost is a lot of our cost is growing.
Yeah, there's definitely a big difference between having to negotiate knowledge workers in a service industry and then really working with people who still have to be on the ground, and particularly at sea, and trying to figure out how to get people home. And that must put a lot of pressure on the employees themselves, but also on everybody trying to make sure that everyone stays engaged and feels safe in those environments. That must be really difficult, actually. Speaking of the knowledge worker side of this, so there's been a lot of companies that have announced over the last, couple of months, some shift in the way that they look at their office space. A recent study by Arizant showed that a third of large accounting firms plan to downsize their office space in the aftermath of the pandemic. What's your outlook on CFOs who are cutting off office space in half to rationalize costs? How do you think this is going to impact the way you engage with your employees? Maybe we can start with you, Mikkel. I know we've had our own conversations around that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marilyn. No, I think to be able to lower your office footprint is something to consider, but if you're just coming from a cost-cutting point of view, I think if it's that one-dimensional, I think you're missing the bigger picture. There are trade-offs, like in most things, and while there could be and I think with the attractive part of it is that the cost-cutting of an office space is very tangible, versus what you're losing is not very tangible, and it might not be immediately visible. So I think to weigh it up against collaboration with the team, and also is the team and the company, is it ready to transition into working more from distance from right away, or does it need to be a transition phase in doing so? So I don't blame CFOs for doing what CFOs need to do, but I do think that it's a collaborative team, a whole company effort. It's a whole shift that everyone needs to participate in. Otherwise, you will lose out in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, I think this idea of on the one side, it's a very tangible cost rationalization versus a very set of intangible second-order effects is a very good way of labeling that. Jean-Luc, tell us about you. You're in the service industry. It's all about human beings. How do you address that?
I fully agree with what Mikkel just said, and I don't think it can come only from this cost perspective or top-down. I think this is definitely something on which we need to involve the team. And this is not something which should be top-down, but also bottom-up. So the way we are proceeding here and the way we look at that is to make it around the company purpose. And I think this lockdown has moved us into a phase where you have a bit more self-discipline, where you have a bit more trust, where you have a bit more a support mindset from the manager to their teams. And it would be extremely counterproductive just to look at it in a cost-saving perspective. So what we have done, we have launched an internal survey in order to foresee with our colleagues how will they project working from home into the future, what will be the trade-off that Mikkel just mentioned, what will be the added value, and make that around the company culture. So we are a service company. You need to provide the perfect service to the clients. You need to have people sitting together in certain circumstances in order to strengthen the brand, in order to strengthen the culture, in order to create the trust that we need to have between each others. And then the impact you will get on the P&L comes in the second line. Just to give you an example, we have made some calculation in terms of efficiency between working from the call centers or working from home. And you have additional efficiency working from home in certain circumstances. So you can gain on both sides in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of office space. But I think you need to take the full dimension and do not underestimate this culture or this trust that you want to have, and getting people sitting in the same place, help them to challenge each other, to benchmark each other, to grow, which is not possible when you work from home 100%.
Absolutely. Rushdi, what about you? I mean, you have a mix certainly of knowledge workers and then people on the front lines. How have you balanced that, and what are your thoughts about the need for office space?
So I think coming from the finance function, as the top line gets impacted, for us naturally we're looking at places from which to be able to cut costs. Having said that, the facility space and office spaces seems to be a more humane place to just go and look for where can we optimize cost. But we did it very rationally, and I would say with a lot of thought behind it. As we stand, we've got 1,500 employees. We looked around, we've got 50 odd offices in the region. And then we picked up some offices where we had 3-4 individuals who would come into the office, largely sales staff, who would occasionally be there, and for whom the office was kind of a address on their business card, but little more. And so our take on this was, even though the pandemic would clear, is there an ability to look at space more rationally? Do we need this office space in the long term? And can we just let go of this and provide them the IT facilities and the infrastructure for them to permanently work out of home? We bounced off the individuals, it worked. And given some of these off sites or remote ones, that would seem to be a natural place to go. But I think I would agree with the panelists more broadly. The office is going to be at the heart of the business. It's not going to go away. What we're going to migrate from today's environment of 100% work from home is a more flexible setup where employees will want to come to office a few days in the week, in our sense. And then we'll also want to seek flexibility for some other days where they can just work out of home, work out of where they are the most productive. That's the view that we're listening to from our organization. And that's where we naturally think this entire thing is going to go. Of course, it's important that there's continuity, there's handoffs, the business critical elements, especially in industries such as the one that GE has power in, will have frontline staff at sites, and that need is not going to go. But largely for support functions, including finance, we've got to reconsider the concept of an office space. It will be at the heart of businesses, but will there be a 9 to 5 attendance in offices? I think that world is behind us, is the sense we get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tomorrow, actually, in our last session, we have a debate about the need for office space or not. And I'm definitely in agreement with you. The office doesn't just serve a purpose for a space. It's not a factory. It's not just where people come to work. There are so many other dimensions around coming together that really matter. And it's really about finding the balance between those two things. And I'm going to move us on maybe to also, I wanted us to talk about some positive things that have happened, because cost rationalization can be depressing for everybody. We're still, all fearful for our jobs and our careers. I lost a job at the beginning of the pandemic, so maybe I can also move you on to something a bit more positive. And I wanted to ask if you had a story from your companies about something really amazing that employees have done, whether in supporting the company or each other, your community, in figuring out new revenue streams or great ways to keep the business running. Rushdi, maybe you can start us off.
No, sure. I think when the pandemic kicked in, I think a natural move was towards working from home, digitization. How do we use IT to be able to keep productivity and keep the office staff working, right? And at the back of our minds, we were thinking through that challenge. What's that going to meet? And I think two instances which come out. One is we've got 150 strong sales team. A sales guy has to be, especially in this part of the world, be in our customers' offices to not just introduce deals, but also to close them, especially in the closing stages. And we were wondering, how is this going to work out when all of this is going to happen remotely in our part of the world? We saw resilience, and that is an innate part of the DNA of this region. We saw creativity. One example of it was, think about Iraq, Ministry of Electricity, government customer used to faxes, and them adopting Skype to take on calls from our offices in Dubai and making that shift. So we're seeing adoption of technology and digitization in a way which is going to be hugely accretive and add to productivity for the future, but also credit to the sales team from GE who could make that happen, nudge the customer, get their internet back up, and ensure they were downloading Skype and were on those calls. And the second one was, we have had business continuity plan. This naturally was a black swan event. Nobody could have forecasted 100% of the employees working through VPNs. And we went in with a lot of concern. Will VPN hold up? Will everybody have access when they log in from their homes? And hats off to those individuals to being able to set us up and ensuring the continuity as we work through it in different countries that we all work in. So those are two outcomes.
The pandemic really does show the resilience of the human species and our ability to put on, different hats to make sure that we survive. Jean-Luc, what are some of the beautiful stories coming out of your organization?
Yeah, and we went through a sort of a similar experience during which in 24 hours you need to switch 650 people from working in the office altogether to work from home. And this resilience has been impressive on both the operations and the support functions. I think the capability of the support functions to set this up in a couple of hours. I'm thinking about the HR department putting up the time tracking, for example, or everything which is related to the payroll in a couple of hours to manage something in a completely different way was a success. But also the capability of the managers to mobilize themselves and to keep track of their teams, which has also, I think, at least on the French experience, been an opportunity for employees to recognize the work of their managers and the complexity of their role. And I think many of our team members have had a lot of respect for the full responsibility of their managers and their leaders. And the good experience I had was one of our clients who came back to us after a couple of weeks or a month after the lockdown, coming back to us saying, okay, guys, we would like to deliver a bonus for your team due to the capability they had to keep the connection with our clients, to continue the service, and to make collection in a time which was extremely tough, with empathy and with ethics. And that was for me the best feedback that we had coming from a client for the team who had delivered the service for their own clients. So I fully agree with you, Rushdi, the capability of resilience and to mobilize the resources to deliver the right level of service with the right level of mindset, empathy and ethics has been definitely a positive experience.
Oh, that's a beautiful example. It's really, so wonderful to be rewarded by your customers in such a difficult time. And also, given what you guys do, which is collection, I mean, it's certainly not the easiest thing to feel happy about, and to see that things still flow. And I know you put a lot of efforts in how your employees represent the brand, and how they talk about these issues with the clients of their clients. And we'll talk about that a bit later. I think that's really such a beautiful testament to everybody coming together and trying to keep things flowing. Mikkel, tell us about your stories.
Yeah, I don't think there's one specific one. There's many small ones that sort of accumulate. I think that could be. I'm not going to tell all of them because I don't think we have time. But it goes from still having the happy hours and the random poker games on Zoom instead of having it in life, and keeping up the social aspect of the office going. But I think what not to steal your point, Rushdi, but the adoption of new technology, I think that's probably the overall most positive I've seen for us. We've had a lot of software projects in the pipeline in upgrading and implementation stages for the last 6 to 12 months, and this sort of thing has obviously just sparked. Everybody all of a sudden could see this is something we need. And they've been more willing to let go of how we used to do things in the past, because they can see one way or another we're probably never going to go fully back to that. So, and as most people know, like it's not about developing and finding the new technology. It's implementation is really the hard part of getting the maximum utility out of it. And I think this has really used this one specific software we're using to share market information across the trading teams. The development team has done a great job in setting it up, but maybe the user base hasn't been as good as giving feedback as we went through it, and this has sort of turned that on its head, and now it's more of everyone can see that this is something that's critical to the organization, and not just something that's critical next year. It's critical right now. And have sped the whole thing up.
Yeah, I used to have a colleague who used to say, he was on the technical side of the world, and he used to say the bug is between the screen and the keyboard, meaning it's the human. It's never. But in that sense, I think it's also so important to focus on engagement and getting people on board. It's really never just about the tech. And actually, that leads me to a question I wanted to ask you specifically, Mikkel, which is, I know that you've spent quite a lot of time engaging with your employees and trying to figure out what the future of work looks like for you guys, and what kind of work models you're going to have. Tell us about how you engaged with your teams and how they felt about being part of the process.
Yeah, so what we did, we have as this thing happened, we've been looking for an office to change office and from our current location in London to another location in London, but we wanted to get out of where we were, and the initial idea was to almost go from like to like. With the crisis, with the virus coming on board, and we proved or demonstrated that at least we're coping very well working from home. Maybe we're not reaching 100%, but because I do agree with the rest of the panel that some sort of office is useful for the organization, but it's to what degree. So we started investigating into going for a serviced office solution. We're still going through that process now, but one of the things we did is we sent out a survey to the team. There's about 25-30 people in the office, and we sent out and asked for their feedback in terms of location, in terms of what's important to them. What is important to them in terms of working in the office, and what's important to them in terms of working from home. Because some people, especially in London, real estate is expensive. Not everybody can go into a spare bedroom and use it as an office.
Sure.
There's a lot of practical things you have to consider as well. So the feedback was really positive, and actually we did a feedback session with what the survey showed us with the team last week, and had a good discussion there as well. And while of course end of the day, everybody can appreciate that. Everybody wants, of course, a better solution for themselves. But I think if you bring people along, you ask for their opinion, you listen to them, and you will find surprising things. Like one thing I didn't think about in terms of when we ask people to work more from home, we also need to provide them the equipment to work from home efficiently. The number one preferred piece of equipment was a chair. I didn't see that one coming. I thought it would be a monitor or something, but no, it was an office chair. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. But also showed, for example, that we would like a lot of people were happy to work from home, but maybe not fully from home.
Right.
And they would still like to have a dedicated office space in the office. So there's a lot of push and pull and a lot of things to consider when doing it. And I think we're probably leaning into having more probable that we're going to have more people working from home going forward. But at the same time, we probably will adjust as we go. That's where the service office comes in handy. We can adjust as we go. We don't need to commit to a certain office space as we for the next 10 years. So I think it's and I think when people are heard, even if they don't get exactly what they want afterwards, I think they can appreciate why we landed up with a solution that there is, and on average as a team, it's a net gain for everyone.
For sure, bringing people on board with you is really essential. No matter what the outcome ends up being, at least they understand the process and that they can live with the consequences, right? Jean-Luc, I wanted to ask you particularly, I mean, usually it's quite rare to see someone come from HR into general management. So I was quite excited to have you on the panel because normally it's the CFOs and the COOs and so on. And I think you're going to have a very unique perspective actually on the value of value creation across the board. And I think you kind of mentioned those words earlier. I just want you to unpack this idea for us. You talked about brand and culture and employee engagement. Just tell me about how you see this now, going from someone who was focused on that side of the world, who now has to sort of look at the whole value creation for the organization. And what are your thoughts on how you approach that decision on a daily basis?
Well, complex question, but I spent 20 years in HR and now leading a country of 650 people in a service company. And we do a business which is not an easy one, credit management services. I never met anyone who wanted to do credit management services since she or he is 4 years old. Which means that you need to have a meaningful purpose and you need definitely to work on this purpose and the culture that you deliver for your clients and your clients' clients. And that's where I think, let's say, HR slash leadership makes a huge difference. We just have people. And what we do deliver to our clients is taking care of their own customers in order to provide them cash, in order to find solutions for their clients to get rid of their debts or find any way to improve their situation. So starting with the people, whatever it is your clients, whatever it is the debtors or your own employees, then you can definitely strengthen your purpose and the value that you do create. Of course, you need to deliver on your P&L. Of course, you need to grow your top line. You need to improve your bottom line, and you need to find the right level of efficiency. But in this business, the quality part, the compliance part, the ethical part, let's say empathy that you need to demonstrate to your stakeholders is extremely key. So the reason for me to move from the HR to this P&L ownership role has been definitely to push for the value of the people. And I think this crisis that we went through has definitely accelerated or boosted a bit this mindset, this value of the people, and will also probably increase the adjustment that we will get, not only in terms of structure, moving to a super hierarchical company into more small self-driven team, but also the culture of service and the culture of adjustment. That's where we are.
Well, see, you had a great answer to my complex question. Rushdi, I want to ask you a question actually from our Q&A from our audience. So Imad writes, the effect on top line is immediate and more apparent, obviously, because depending on your industry, your top line has been directly impacted. The effect on bottom line is underway and about to be seen. But he's asking specifically, what cash flow management strategies, especially when it comes to SMEs, do you think you would recommend? So it's like that.
Sure. So we've Of course, the first thing we wanted to look at was cash. What are the available lines from a treasury standpoint? What are the cash inflows and the outflows? And this became almost a daily rigor. We set up a command center team focused on cash because that, as everybody understands, is the lifeblood of business, especially in concerning times like these. We looked at the cash inflows, what are the commitments from customers, milestones that we have to execute towards in order to be able to claim that cash, and how that de-risked. I think what stood out was customers through this process are also looking at reliable service providers, equipment providers who will stand by them. And to that extent, they were willing to come in and support with ensuring those milestones get honored and payments are made. So we used that to our benefit. Of course, it helps being in a critical industry where the uptake and the reliability matters. With some others, we also worked with our customers and introduced financing schemes to them. As large multinational with heavy presence in the US and Europe, we have access to financial institutions such as ECAs, and we can pass on the benefit of those guarantees such that even when the markets are going through a bad phase, banks are not lending as much, there is still a free flow of cash, and we help that through our relationship with our customers and passed on those unique benefits to them such that they could make payments. So that's on the inflow side. On the cash outflow, similarly, with a fine needle, we kind of looked at every invoice which had to get paid. Is there a possibility to look at deferrals? There are certain companies and countries which came up with packages of, it could be late tax payments. We looked at such kind of openings and how that could help. We looked at other countries where we have factory footprints where there were short-term loans which could be offered and could be aware of that so that we could benefit from a cash inflow. So I think a lot of creativity, a lot of thinking on the feet, which happened as we looked at both the cash inflows and outflows. We know, particularly to your question, I think, Imad, on SMEs, we rely on them. Business continuity is as much of importance to them as it is to large multinationals. And we wanted to ensure we were not asking unreasonable payment terms from them through this crisis, and ensuring they had the right credit to be able to move ahead with their operations and not impact their employees as well. So with that in mind, I think a lot of on the feet thinking, looking at sources of cash, helping financial institutions do their work instead of us having to extend payment terms, and then looking at government stimuli packages to see how can they help us in certain spots and working that to our benefit as well. So I think the magic of what large multinationals can do without compromising on what we need to do towards our vendors as well.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. Maybe one of you can pick it up, but it's a complex question, so let's go. So from the audience, we have, how much have you saved on travel and office rents and utilities? Have these savings been offset by equipment purchases for employees' homes? That's kind of the point Mikkel was making earlier about what people need in order to be able to be operating. And the last part of that question is, are you measuring the relative productivity of remote work compared to usual times, and if so, how? So essentially a question on, are you measuring these impacts in terms of both savings and productivity, and do they offset themselves? Like, do these things offset each other? Jean-Luc, I hear you.
Well, from the Intrum perspective, yes, we do follow it up, especially on the second part of the question when it comes to the efficiency, but also the quality of the connection that we do have with the debtors. So we have set an NPS score, which has been followed every week in order to make sure that we have the same quality of connection with the consumers as we had before, but also the same efficiency. When it comes to the costs, I think the saving that we might have done are offset by the investment that you need to do, either in equipment or in time, in a certain way, because of course managing people remotely takes a bit more time and a bit more resources than it used to be when you have all your team in the same room. However, there is something that we have gained, and that's the switch from the Swedish experience to the French one. Now we start meeting on time and we finish them on time. And that was one of the best value we have added with this.
Oh, that's a very valid point. I agree with you fully. We also no longer need to move rooms to get to the meeting, so no one has an excuse. Another question from our audience is I'll read it out loud and you can decide who wants to take this one. But what are some of the leading indicators of productivity gain or loss? So Jean-Luc, you mentioned NPS. Maybe Mikkel and Rushdi, you can tell us about what indicators are you using to track the impact of remote work, and how do you see that flowing into the P&L in the long run?
Yeah, so I could go first, Mikkel.
Please.
That's fine. We've got multiple segments that we work on, particularly on the service side. Things like FIFO rates, billing hours, utilization hours become important. Do we have people sitting on the bench just because there's not enough orders coming in? Do we have product cost going up as a result of FIFO as well? So those become KPIs which feed our input on the costing side. Through the crisis, we saw, because of COVID restrictions, we could not do multiple shifts. Work may have been limited to one shift in Saudi Arabia, just regulatory requirements. We also saw customers coming to us and saying, instead of you being able to send people or the crew right away, they had to be in quarantine for 14 days. So here were 50 people in quarantine for 14 days before they started the job, and then 14 days after they exited the job. And that can be a severe punitive measure for us from a cost standpoint, because they're sitting idle, not doing much. So I think the metrics are there. What came out of this was us trying to assess the impact of some of these hardships which were caused by COVID and the environment around us, and how does that flow in, and how do we look at productivity measures to be able to offset some of that impact as well. I think that was more relevant for us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rushdi. So we're 5 minutes away from the end. Mikkel, you had a point to add, and then I'll ask you my wrap-up question.
No, it's just I think for us in terms of our travel costs versus outweighing the home office, it's far wasted. But also, I think most companies use so much software now that you can see if the quality is dropping relatively or within a certain time frame. And so I'm not so worried about that being falling off. It's more the customer facing time I'm worried about my falling off. That where we need to be focused on, and also how many of our previously applied KPIs can you really apply to the current world, because a lot of things has changed. So there will be some reviewing, but I think we have enough numbers going to assist, and that should be measurable.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a relevant point. Which KPIs will survive the pandemic is also a good question. And on that point, I'm going to ask you my wrap-up question. So I'll start with you, Mikkel. I want you to finish the sentence and tell us why. So the future of work is ...
Agile.
Agile. And why do you use that word?
It's also maybe a little bit specific to our situation. We've been moving towards a more agile organization for a long time, and this is sort of has accelerated the process. I think an organization or a company able to meet up and have FaceTime and have those collaborative meetings, but at the same time also be able to be productive almost anywhere. I think that can be a real competitive advantage in almost any industry. Some things, of course, like in our industry, we do have specific hardware. You do need people there to operate it, and there's no near-term future where that's not going to be applicable. But everything else, I think, to be able to measure up, to weigh up what you need to, how much FaceTime you need, how much can you do from home, how much can you do from the office without traveling, and to have that skill set in the organization. I think that could be it'll save a lot of money, it'll be a lot more efficient, it'll be a lot more agile. And again, it could be that you might need a situation where you need to scale up again, but then so you set up and your agility. So in one word, agile. Yeah.
Rushdi, the future of work is?
I loved agility, but that's taken. I'll go with resilience. I think we have to adapt to change. So agility is there. But the fact of the matter is, as people in the business world, crises keep coming, and they have shorter cycles than ever before. The depth of resilience in our employees, in our system, to reboot our operating models, to look at new ways of revenue, to look at how digitalization is going to impact our industries that we're working in, our behaviors in the office space and outside, will require resilience. It will require reimagining of our portfolios. We'll have to retool our employees with new growth behaviors. We'll also have to ensure that even as they're working remotely, how can you go ahead and pat somebody on the back when there's a good job done? Things that we should not miss out on. So I would go with resilience.
Beautiful. And Jean-Luc, the future of work is?
For me, that would be trust. I think trust is a combination of the right intent and the right performance. And this is definitely something on which, at least in our business, it will make a huge difference. And moving a bit from the comply to the self-discipline, from the control to the support, and a bit from hierarchy to a bit more autonomy and self-driven team. And I think trust is definitely the currency of the future, in order, at least in the service company, for the future organization of work.
3 amazing words: agility, resilience, and trust. I wanted to share something before we close this session that really hit home for me when I read it. And I thought I would share it in this session because we're talking about numbers, and I found that it would be a beautiful contrast. It's a quote by an INSEAD professor called Gianpiero Petriglieri in an article he wrote recently called In Praise of the Office. And it says, but I have yet to hear one CEO declare, I am grateful for our employees who stayed productive during a pandemic, even more so than usual. I'm only sorry that many will have done so for fear of losing their jobs, of being forgotten, or of letting the company down in a crisis. I regret it if you found yourself at home, flooded with messages and tasks, and you just kept panic working. We must find ways to stop that. And I think I just want to recap some of the great insights from the sessions. I really love our discussion about how people have risen to the challenge and shown resilience in tough times. We discussed the fact that the value of the office will always be there, and I invite our audience to join our debate in the closing of the session tomorrow at 4:15 p.m. Dubai time. Of course, it's important to allow more flexibility, and trust is a huge factor in all of this. Thank you so much for joining us and bringing all your amazing insights from your various industries and the various countries where you're joining us from today. I was really so grateful for your insights and your valuable contributions, and definitely a lot to think about. A huge thank you to our attendees as well for tuning in and asking us tough questions, possibly tougher than the ones I had written. Of course, the video will be posted on social pages and website. People will be able to engage with it moving forward. A small reminder that we have a competition going for 5 companies to win a free consultation with Cosmic Centaurs. All you have to do is go on our conference page on the website and tell us what kind of interesting work challenge your company is facing and how we can support you. We hope to welcome all of you back at our 3rd and final session of the day at 3 p.m. Dubai time, where we'll be discussing the future of recruitment and how to address the job market in this post-pandemic world. Once again, thank you so much, Mikkel, Jean-Luc, and Rushdi, for joining us. This has been an amazing panel, and I'm just so grateful to have had you here.
Thank you for inviting us. Thanks for hosting.
All right, signing off.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. Thank you. This was excellent. Appreciate it. Thank you.